on the hook for millions of dollars in damages after the verdicts in the landmark social media addiction trial. We are 40 days into the partial government shutdown that has led to long lines. Look at that at the airports. We'll get an update if there's any hope for a deal. And the blame game over the murder of a Chicago woman allegedly by an illegal immigrant, repeat offender. But first, breaking tonight, President Trump's press secretary says he is not bluffing with his Friday deadline on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Caroline Leavitt says the president is prepared to unleash hell, in her words, if Iran miscalculates again. The Islamic regime is rejecting an American plan to pause the conflict in the Middle East. An anonymous official tells Iranian state TV that the country will end the war when its own conditions are met. Correspondent Alexander Hoff starts us off tonight live from the North Lawn of the White House. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening, Brett. Today, the White House would not confirm exactly who is representing each side in the U.S. negotiations with Iran. President Trump says that these talks have been productive, even as Iran has dismissed a potential ceasefire plan.
If Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell.
That is, if ceasefire negotiations with Iran prove unsuccessful. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt did not elaborate on a possible 15-point peace plan drawn by the U.S. and cautioned that early reports of the plan weren't entirely factual. According to Iranian state-run media, a U.S. proposal has been rejected and countered with 5 specific conditions, including Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, a vital shipping passage for much of the world's oil supply. Iran's foreign minister says Iran has no plans to negotiate.
The clear signal has been Iran is not where we want them to be, and they're saying they got no intention of moving in that direction.
House Speaker Mike Johnson is more optimistic, saying today he feels a resolution is nearing.
I think we're wrapping up Operation Epic Fury. That's what I think. And I think it will be done in short order.
Despite the administration deploying about 1,500 U.S. troops to the region. The 82nd Airborne Division, they're typically deployed at the beginning of conflicts. So does the White House consider this conflict as wrapping up, or is it changing shape?
As I said at the beginning of my remarks, we are meeting our goals of Operation Epic Fury expeditiously. The president likes to maintain options at his disposal.
According to brand new Fox News polling, 58% of registered voters oppose current U.S. military action in Iran, with 44% feeling that the action will make the U.S. less safe in the long run. And on affordability, the administration says it's coming up with creative solutions to keep the price of oil stable, but many industries are already predicting the effects of this. The U.S. Postal Service, for example, is seeking approval for an 8% fuel surcharge on all deliveries that would be effective on April 26th, Brett.
Alex Hoff, live from the North Lawn. Alex, thanks. A decrease in oil prices sent stocks up today. The Dow gained 305. The S&P 500 finished ahead 36. The Nasdaq jumped 168. Some of the Gulf states being targeted by Iran are considering larger roles in the conflict. This comes as one nation in particular is urging the U.S. to press ahead with its bombing campaign. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt is in Tel Aviv again tonight.
Thick black smoke rises from Kuwait's airport, the latest aftermath of thousands of Iranian attacks on its Gulf neighbors, which are bearing the brunt of the Islamic Republic's aggression. According to Saudi-owned Al Arabiya News, 85% of Iran's missile and drone strikes have targeted Gulf states, compared to about 15% aimed at Israel. And as Iran hits critical infrastructure and energy production facilities, along with bringing the Strait of Hormuz to a near standstill, many of these countries are losing patience. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Qatar all reserving the right to respond and retaliate.
It's now up to the Iranians post this war, of course, to decide how they're going to rebuild the trust that was lost due to their attacks on our sovereignty.
While some Gulf nations publicly push for diplomacy, Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reportedly doesn't want the war to end, asking President Trump to keep it going until the Iranian regime is toppled. There are also worries about the Iranian-backed Houthis entering the conflict, as Iranian officials threaten to close yet another strategic oil and gas shipping route that is the gateway to the Suez Canal. As for negotiations and peace, the Iranian military says no deal for the U.S. or Iran's Gulf neighbors.
Until it is our will, nothing will go back to the way it was. That will only come about when the very thought of acting against the Iranian nation is completely wiped from their corrupt minds.
Bahrain has proposed a UN Security Council resolution to use all means necessary to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. That idea is getting some pushback because it could potentially mean UN-backed military action against Iran, but it is a clear sign of just how frustrated the Gulf nations are with the situation in this region right now. Brett?
Jonathan Hunt, live in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, thank you. In a few minutes, we'll talk about the Iran conflict and the conditions in the Middle East with the Minister of State for the United Arab Emirates. Tonight, any momentum to secure an agreement to end the Homeland Security funding stalemate appears to have dissipated, with Republicans accusing Democrats of changing their position, moving the goalpost, essentially. Chief Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram tells us where things stand at this hour.
Travelers fuming as airport lines swell.
We're 4.5 hours ahead of our flight.
Republicans agog that Democrats balked at their own plan to fund everything at DHS except ICE.
You can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. You can't lead a Democrat to common sense if they're committed to crazy.
Democrats advocated chopping up the DHS
and they're
funding
committed
bill
to crazy. You're right.
My view is we should separate out the TSA, the Coast Guard, and FEMA.
But Democrats blocked a GOP effort to do just that today.
The Democrats are a little bit like the Iranians. They realize that they can extract more if they don't seek a solution.
Democrats deny the Republican accusation that they moved the goalposts.
This is nonsense. Nonsense. We've been talking about ICE reforms from day one.
Oh,
however, some Republicans
what a
oppose
jerk.
their own option to
Sad,
fund some
sad
of
person.
DHS.
We have never done that. I think that's a bad precedent.
Even the threat of a canceled 2-week congressional break isn't splitting the logjam.
I don't think we ought to go on recess if we haven't funded the government.
But the House may bolt from Washington unless a deal is within range.
The House can sit around here and wait upon the Senate so they can go home and work in their districts and be summoned right back.
One lawmaker has an explanation for the deadlock.
Members have become, hardened in their positions. There are fewer members who are willing to kind of find that middle.
Senate Republicans still stymied over voter ID legislation. The GOP now pushing a special process to avoid a filibuster. But conservatives are skeptical about the success of that play call.
Talking to senators who want the Save America Act to pass, they go, yeah, this is fake. It isn't going to work.
Now the Senate is still debating the Save America Act, even though it's going nowhere. The Senate votes Thursday on mandating ID for voting. Brett?
Chad Pergram live on the Hill. Chad, thanks. A California jury has found Meta and YouTube responsible for harm to a now 20-year-old plaintiff who alleges she became addicted to social media and that Meta and YouTube deliberately designed their platforms to encourage use.
Amen.
Two tech companies
About time, and I'm glad I got after them.
Fox Business correspondent Kelly Saberi has the latest tonight from Los Angeles. Good
Protect our young people.
Good evening, Brett. Today, Meta and YouTube were found found liable for negligence and failure to warn in a landmark case that could set the precedent for thousands of trials to come. The jury also deciding that both companies acted in malice, oppression, or fraud. That brings the total damages to an amount of $6 million. That's for both punitive and compensatory damages, with Meta to pay a total of $4.2 million and YouTube to pay $1.8 million. Meta responding, quote, "We respectfully disagree with the verdict and will appeal. Teen mental health is profoundly complex and cannot be linked to a single app," with a Google spokesperson saying, "We disagree with the verdict and plan to appeal. This case misunderstands YouTube, which is a responsibly built streaming platform, not a social media site." Now, the plaintiff, Kaylee GM, that's the only name that we've known for her at this point, was here today to listen to the verdict. She hugged the attorneys as the verdict came down. Now, this was one of the only times she was in the courtroom, as one of the cases that Meta made was that her upbringing was very tumultuous, and they used that in their argument that they did not create her social media addiction. On the other hand, YouTube saying that they are not a social media platform at all. Now here's Kaylee's lawyer speaking earlier today.
We've sent a message with this that you will be held accountable for the features, regardless of whether the children are getting sent pornographic pictures, regardless of whether they're being sexploitated, regardless of those types of issues. Just because of the features alone that drive addiction, these companies can be held accountable.
Amen, and should be.
And parents who have been here throughout the trial celebrated, feeling a sense of relief for perhaps the first time. Some tell Fox Business they lost their kids to suicide after what they say was a social media addiction. And in some cases, they say their children were given material teaching their kids how to die by suicide. And just yesterday, a jury in New Mexico found Meta liable for misleading its users for just how safe its platforms are. They say leading kids to sex predators who are messaging their children. They owe $375 million in this case. Meta saying it will appeal this verdict as well. Brett?
Could be just the start. Kelly, thank you. Up next, we talk with the Minister of State for the United Arab Emirates about the Iran conflict and the current conditions in the Middle East. First, beyond our borders tonight, British police arrest 2 men in connection with an arson attack on 4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish charity. The assault is being investigated as an anti-Semitic hate crime.
Boy,
police have not declared the incident to be a terror attack, but are investigating a claim of responsibility by a group with potential links to Iran. The mayor of Kharkiv says Russia's military struck 2 districts in the Ukrainian city this afternoon, injuring at least 9 people. He says military drones fell in residential areas, damaging buildings and civilian infrastructure there. An American, Michaela Schifrin, secures a record-tying 6th Women's Overall World Cup skiing title at this year's competition in Norway. Schifrin needed only to finish in the top 15 of the giant slalom. Schifrin claimed a 3rd Olympic gold by dominating the slalom at the Milan Cortina Games. Just some of the stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Is responsible for the content of this ad.
It was made clear to the United States that Iran wanted to talk. President Trump is willing to listen. As President Trump announced on Monday, the United States has been engaged over the last 3 days in productive conversations, which led the president to temporarily instruct the Department of War to postpone planned strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure only.
President Trump's press secretary on the prospects for negotiations about the Iran conflict. Joining us tonight is Her Excellency Lana Nusebi, Minister of State for the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellency, thanks for being here.
Brett, thank you for having me on the show.
So, first of all, let's just paint the picture as you see it from the UAE, how things are going, what it looks like from your end of the world.
Well, first of all, Brett, what happens in the Gulf clearly doesn't stay in the Gulf. So Iran's attack on Gulf allies of the United States and Jordan is an attack on the entire world and the world economy, including its closure of the Straits of Hormuz. Let's not forget that 1/5 of the world's oil and gas goes through the Straits of Hormuz. 30% of its fertilizers for food production and harvest goes through the Straits of Hormuz. Almost every product known to every global supply chain coming from the Gulf goes through the Straits of Hormuz. So effectively, Iran is trying to give the global economy a heart attack. We should not allow Iran, a state sponsor of terrorism, to set the global price for food and gas.
I want to ask you what happened, what transpired.
Absolutely agree with her.
Just last month, February 9th, you met in Tehran with the Iranian foreign minister. Out of that, you said there were useful and constructive talks, the determination for bilateral relations between Iran and the UAE to expand. In this war, if you look at the chart, the red dots are the attacks on Gulf Arab states, and you, in this chart, at the UAE have seen exponentially more attacks than even Israel. Why is Israel being attacked, or UAE being attacked more than Israel?
There are a lot of questions there. I think they're really important ones. But you're right, over 60% of the attacks, more than Israel and the Gulf countries combined, have been directed at the UAE. And that's a fundamental question. Why? But going back to your first question, we've always tried the diplomatic channel with Iran. We've tried it for decades. And I was in Tehran in early February. We have been working with the United States for months to try and de-escalate tensions in the region. We were supportive of direct negotiations between the United States and Iran. We did not ask for a war in our region. We did not start a war in our region. But as a result of these operations, we have now seen Iran take the irresponsible decision, instead of negotiating with the United States over really well understood concerns over its nuclear program, over its ballistic missiles program, over its support of non-state terrorist actors in the region. Instead of negotiating over those issues, they chose instead to fire over 2,200 missiles and drones at the United Arab Emirates, a peacemaker in the region, a country that signed the Abraham Accords 5 years ago, a country that has tried to extend the hand of peace to Iran, a country that has tried to push for negotiations and dialogue. So the question is why? And I think the answer is because we are an idea that threatens Iran, that threatens this regime, because we are open, we are progressive, we are tolerant, we're a vibrant economy. And what have they done for their people with the resources that they have? They sit across 3 continents just the same way we do. They have inflation, their currency is in free fall. They had a spate of killing protesters in January. This is a really ruthless regime, and President Trump is right to hold it to account today.
President Trump is now trying that diplomatic effort, or at least he's talking about that, saying that he is reaching out to the Iranians. They are reaching out, he claims, to them, and they're having discussions. The Wall Street Journal writes it this way: Gulf Arab states are growing alarmed by President Trump's eagerness to do a deal to end the war with Iran that leaves them with a hostile but potent rival, and are pushing to continue the fight. People familiar with their position said the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are lobbying the president to stick with the war until Iran is sufficiently weakened that it won't pose a threat. Is that a fair statement?
We support President Trump's efforts to try and conclusively solve the issues I outlined a little bit earlier in our discussion. You can't have a stable region, either in our region or for the rest of the world, if Iran controls the Straits of Hormuz and sets the price of food and gas around the world, which they are currently doing today, 3.5 weeks in. You cannot have a stable region or world economy if Iran sponsors terrorist actors like Hezbollah, like Hamas around the region, groups in Iraq, etc. You cannot have a stable region or world if you have an Iran with a ballistic missile weapons program that today can reach as far as Europe, as we saw with the missile strike on Diego Garcia.
So do you see an end to this? Do you see a light at the end of this tunnel? For the war coming to an end?
The light at the end of the tunnel is in Iran's hands. They have to negotiate with the United States and the international community. The United States does not have to bear this burden alone. The NATO Secretary General came out with a very strong statement supporting President Trump's efforts with partners in Europe to keep the Straits of Hormuz open.
I'd love to hear that.
Over 30 have signed a statement to that effect on Saturday, and more are joining this week. So they are committing resources to keeping the Straits of Hormuz open. So this is not just a U.S. problem. This is a global problem, and that is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Do you think the calls for the Gulf Arab allies, including the UAE, to get involved kinetically in the war are fair?
The UAE has fought side by side with the United States in over 6 coalitions in our history. We have shared values, we have shared history with the United States, we have interoperability with the United States. They are a clear partner to us in regional security, and we intend to double down on that. Today, we are looking at a threat to not only our region, but to the international community at large that needs to be stopped in whatever way possible. The UAE is always for a diplomatic off-ramp at the end of that. We need to use diplomacy, but we need to use diplomacy when Iran understands that its behavior as a rogue actor is not acceptable neither to the region nor to the international community.
But we wouldn't be surprised if the UAE or Saudi Arabia got involved in the fight, actually.
We are already involved in a
you're
fight.
taking incoming, but as far as...
We are not just taking incoming, we are assertively using all options on the table to defend our communities and our people, including 75,000 Americans who reside in the UAE.
Last thing quickly, the UAE and Saudi were at odds over Yemen and Sudan before this conflict started. Has this war changed that dynamic?
Let me take you back to the Houthis in 2015. 10 years ago, they were not the threat they were to the Red Sea. Today, they are threatening to close the other strait in our region, the Red Sea, and they've already closed it. Virtually no ships pass there. No ships are passing through the Straits of Hormuz. We went into a coalition with Saudi Arabia and a number of other countries to stop that threat from Iran because they were funding the Houthis, that the international community didn't see through. What we think needs to happen today is we need to find a definitive, comprehensive solution to Iran becoming a peaceful, responsible neighbor in our region. That requires some grit. It may require some burden sharing with other partners in the region and internationally, but we're all committed to that outcome.
If you were to look at your crystal ball and say, how long does this last, what do you think it looks like?
Depends what the outcomes are. I think we start with securing the Straits of Hormuz. We should be able to do that in the near future. I think building out on that, we need a diplomatic off-ramp of negotiations with whoever is in charge in Iran about its ballistic missile weapons program and its nuclear enrichment program. I mean, to your point about why diplomacy hasn't worked, they told us they didn't have a nuclear enrichment program. Today we know they have enough enriched uranium to make up to 12 bombs. They told us they didn't have a ballistic missiles weapons program that could threaten anyone. They can now reach most capitals in Europe, including also the Gulf, which they've demonstrated they're willing to do. 89% of their targets have been civilian infrastructure in my country. This has to stop.
Your Excellency, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Brett, for having me.
That was
Next, 40 days,
unbelievably
the latest
very
partial
accurate
government shutdown. We have the
report.
latest on the TSA screener crisis at airports.
And we need to stand together with
and
them.
his analysis on the TSA crisis and the battle over the funding for Homeland Security.
Get tax expertise without hidden fees.
Okay.
Join us in supporting them through the next 250 years of strength and resilience. Visit woundedwarriorproject.org/USA250.
Looking live at LaGuardia Airport there in New York, additional investigators are on the scene of Sunday's deadly runway collision at New York's LaGuardia Airport. 2 Air Canada Express pilots killed when a fire truck hit their plane. National Transportation Safety Board investigators say multiple failures contributed to that crash, including a fire truck without a transponder, possible radio interference that may have blocked urgent stop commands, and heavy controller workload during a backlog of delayed flights. This is day 40 of the partial government shutdown that is affecting the Homeland Security Department, most notably TSA screeners at airports. Agency leaders testified today on Capitol Hill. Congressional correspondent Bill Maloogian shows us tonight.
Let me be direct. When the government shuts down, our adversaries do not. Today, 4 DHS agency leaders warned the House Homeland Security Committee about the effects of the now 40-day-long DHS shutdown.
Every day the shutdown drags on moves us closer to a tipping point.
The acting TSA administrator's testimony, grim.
Many in our workforce have missed bill payments, received eviction notices, had their cars repossessed and utilities shut off, lost their child care, defaulted on loans, damaged their credit line, and drained their retirement savings.
McNeil says that TSA is currently dealing with the longest security lines in agency history, some stretching 4.5 hours. She said more than 480 employees have already quit. Call-out rates at some major airports have hit 40 to 50%, and if the shutdown isn't over by Friday, TSA employees will have missed a staggering $1 billion in paychecks.
Some are sleeping in their cars, selling their blood and plasma, and taking on second jobs to make ends meet, all while being expected to perform at the highest level when in uniform.
McNeil also warns that smaller airports may have to close down to consolidate TSA's workforce. And she also had a skirmish with a Democrat who asked what ICE is doing at airports.
I see them all sitting down, looking at their phones or chit-chatting, but it looks like they have no role.
It's been incredibly helpful to alleviate the burden on our workforce, and we're getting positive feedback from passengers and our field leadership alike.
And the TSA administrator also testified that a so-called perfect storm is brewing for the FIFA World Cup this summer. That's because she says TSA has already lost almost 500 employees, and any new hires they make are going to need 4 to 6 months of training before they can even work at airport checkpoints. So they're not going to make it in time for an expected influx of travelers, millions of them, in just over 2 months from now, Brett.
So recess is supposed to start Friday?
Friday, 2-week recess. So they got to figure it out before then.
All right, Bill, thanks.
Yep.
Plenty of hard feelings on Capitol Hill over the Homeland Security funding battle. Let's get some thoughts tonight from Fox News chief political analyst Britt Hume. Britt, we've seen these things time and again. We're coming up on the last record, 43 days. But this one seems to have specific pain with these lines at different airports, despite ICE helping out in some places. Your thoughts on where the blame game stands and how this gets to an end?
Well, Brett, it used to be an absolute article of faith, an axiom, that if the government shut down, no matter how, no matter what the proximate cause was, Republicans would be blamed as, not the Democrats of the party of government. Why would they want to shut it down? And that was true for a long time. I remember one time when Bill Clinton was president, he got a bill on his desk to keep the government open. He vetoed the bill, and people blamed the Republicans who had sent the bill to him. I think that may not be true this time. It wasn't particularly true the last time we had a shutdown. I don't think Mr. Schumer, who engineered it, got much out of that, and I don't see that he could get any more out of this than he's gotten. The most recent offer from the Republicans gave the Democrats much of what they were asking for, and you would think they would simply say yay, declare victory, and end the thing, but they did not. And I think it's, coverage that I've been reading and watching. This isn't being ascribed to Republicans the way it has been in the past, so the political cost of this could be quite high.
You would think at some point Democrats would be hearing, like Republicans do, about their constituents waiting in these absurd lines.
You would think so. It's hard for me to imagine, but remember this, Brett, this is always a factor in everything that happens in Washington these days. The absolute unvarnished hatred of Donald Trump on the American left and in the Democratic Party is a powerful motivating force. And these politicians are under the impression, I think, that if they do not do anything they can to resist and oppose him, that they'll pay for it among the constituents of their party. And that has to be a big factor here, because nothing else makes any sense.
And do you think that they're truly moving the goalposts, when you're talking past each other on these deals?
That's what it looks like. Yeah, it does. It looks like the Republicans have been willing to give ground up to a point. Democrats have been willing to take the ground and demand more.
All right, we'll follow it. Try to avoid those lines. Brett, thank you. Up next, Savannah Guthrie gives her first interview since the disappearance of her mother nearly 2 months ago. And later, the growing backlash after the murder of a Chicago college student, allegedly by an illegal immigrant repeat offender. Today's show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie says somebody needs to do the right thing and provide information about her missing 84-year-old mother. Guthrie gave her first interview since Nancy Guthrie's disappearance nearly 2 months ago.
I wake up every night, in the middle of the night, every night, and in the darkness, I imagine her terror. And it is unthinkable that those thoughts demand to be thought.
So tough. Our prayers are with you, Savannah. Investigators said they believe Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped or otherwise taken against her will. Anyone with information concerning this case is asked to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. Outrage is growing over the murder of a Loyola University student in Chicago, allegedly by an illegal immigrant repeat offender. Some of that outrage is directed at Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker. But Pritzker is trying to shift the focus to a familiar target, President Trump. However, families familiar with such tragedies have a different takeaway today. Correspondent Garrett Tenney reports tonight from Chicago.
This was preventable and should have never happened. We just don't have serious leaders in Illinois.
Governor Pritzker needs to point the finger directly at himself.
Angel families in Illinois are speaking out after Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker deflected blame for the killing of 18-year-old Sheridan Gorman, allegedly at the hands of an illegal immigrant, suggesting that President Trump not his state's sanctuary policies are responsible.
I agree there have been real failures, for national failures, a failure to have comprehensive immigration reform, a failure of the president to follow his own edict to go after the worst.
Shame on you.
Sheridan Gorman and a group of friends went out to appear to see the Northern Lights early last Thursday when police say the group was ambushed by 25-year-old Jose Medina, a Venezuelan national according to DHS, who allegedly shot and killed the college freshman as she tried to run away.
Sheridan was a light in everyone's lives. She never had anything negative to say about anyone. She always had a positive shine to her.
Following Medina's arrest, the Gorman family blamed Illinois' policies, saying, when systems fail, whether through release decisions, lack of coordination, or unwillingness to act, the consequences are not abstract. They are real. And in our case, they are permanent. Despite that, today, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson still says ICE isn't welcome in his city.
Chicago does not want ICE on our streets, in our airports, nor in our cities.
Shame on you, buddy.
Chicago believes in abolishing
You've
ICE.
ruined Chicago.
Tonight, the student newspaper at Loyola University is apologizing for referring to Jose Medina as an illegal immigrant. The paper has now updated their article to describe him as simply a Rogers Park resident. Medina is currently in the hospital with tuberculosis and is expected to appear virtually for his first court hearing on Friday. Brett?
Garrett Tenney live in Chicago. Garrett, thanks. Up next, the panel on the latest developments in the Iran conflict, plus the congressional standoff over Homeland Security funding. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 26 in Houston has several people dangle in the air during an amusement ride malfunction at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Spokesman for the event
be up there.
The Tango ride experienced a generator issue for 2 to 3 minutes. No injuries, fortunately, reported. Fox 5 in Las Vegas says the NBA approves exploring bids for new franchises in Las Vegas and Seattle. The bidding process is expected to generate offers of up to $10 billion for each team. Both squads are expected to begin play in 2028. And this is a live look at Denver. One of the big stories there tonight from Fox 31. Contents of a time capsule placed near the Colorado Capitol more than a century ago have been revealed. They include newspapers, a 2-page typewritten letter, business cards, and a booklet of legislative acts about the monument. The tin box was found unexpectedly last year. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.
It doesn't.
Okay.
I think we're wrapping up Operation Epic Fury. That's what I think.
The world is staring down the barrel of a weather war. It's time to stop climbing the escalation ladder and start climbing the diplomatic ladder.
Talks continue. They are productive, as the president said on Monday, and they continue to be. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details.
But to the extent that there is any communication, the clear signal has been Iran is not where we want them to be. And they're saying they got no intention of moving in that direction.
Well, where are we on the war? Public opinion. We have a new poll out tonight, Fox News poll, about where you stand, the current U.S. military action in Iran. And you can see all voters at 42-58 opposed, but Republicans at 77-23, Democrats at 12 and 88. If you split it by going well, not going well, by partisan divide, you can see the numbers. Democrats 21-79, Republicans 81-18. That's the break. Let's bring in our panel, Fox News political analyst Reince Priebus. Chris Ryan, host of New Hampshire Today with Chris Ryan on WGIR and iHeartRadio, and Melissa DeRosa, former chief of staff to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. All right, Reince, you can see in those polls, Republicans are holding, but there is, concern about how long it lasts, what this goes towards. The White House, the president continues to say these talks are continuing.
Well, look, obviously it does matter. We're early on in the campaign. There's a long way to go to the midterms, so obviously we worry about polls all the time. But look, I agree. I think the president, he's going to do everything he can to get a win in this situation. He's got to get a win. Iran rejected the proposal, apparently, supposedly.
We don't
today.
really know who's in charge.
Yeah,
so we just get these
problem.
anonymous, like Iranian says
Right.
no from Iranian state TV. There's no guy that's standing up saying this is what we don't agree with.
Well, that's right, and you get these sort of odd statements that are sort of insulting. You don't know where they're coming from, and I think if I'm thinking about what the president would do, I would fully expect the president is either going to continue the status quo or he's going to increase our presence in Iran. I think he's going to bruise them up very, very badly, even more than they've even felt to this day. I would put my bet on an increased presence. I think the regime is masochistic. I don't think the president, I think his patience is probably growing thin, even though he knows he would like to find a way out. But I don't think it's going to come that easy.
The Trump military objectives, this is from Friday, the Truth Social, Melissa, degrade missile capabilities, eliminate Navy and Air Force, destroy defense industrial base, never allow Iran to get even close to nuclear capability, protect Middle Eastern allies. I asked the UAE Minister of State about how long that might take. Take a listen. You see a light at the end of this tunnel.
The light at the end of the tunnel is in Iran's hands. They have to negotiate with the United States and the international community. The United States does not have to bear this burden alone. World leaders, over 30, have signed a statement to that effect on Saturday, and more are joining this week. So they are committing resources to keeping the Straits of Hormuz open. So this is not just a U.S. problem.
It does seem like the world is getting more engaged in this, Melissa.
Well, it seems that way because I think it is that way. And I think that as every day goes forward, it's becoming less of a choice. I think that they're realizing with the Strait of Hormuz being what it is and with Iran continuing to shoot into neighboring countries and the distance of the missiles that they have actually been able to make, that this is a problem for Europe. This is a problem for all of the Gulf region. But when we're looking at this from a political perspective, the president is stuck between a rock and a hard place. You may have partisan consensus, as we've seen, partisanship has continued to harden, but the independents are breaking decisively against this war. And the more we ramp it up, which I think is going to be required in order to get to an end point, to reach the goals the president laid out, the more instability you see in the markets. The more they talk about peace and the more they talk about the possibility of diplomacy, you see the gas prices come down, you see the market steady. And so he's really in a tough no-win situation right now.
It was also, Chris, a tough no-win situation listening to Iran, finding out in these negotiations, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, that they had all of this 60% enriched uranium, enough to make 10 bombs. They didn't know that. Then the fact that they had this missile that could fly 4,000 kilometers, they never said they had that. Here's Tony Blinken, former Secretary of State, talking about how they dealt with it back then.
We worked very hard on getting that longer and stronger agreement. And I think at various points, we were really leaning into it. The Iranians were leaning back. At other points, they were leaning in, and we had our own constraints. I'll acknowledge, too, that sometimes politics gets in the way. You have midterm elections. It shouldn't be, but it is too often a factor.
So it's interesting to hear that in this perspective.
Yes, here's where I think we're at this point in time. Iran is utilizing the Strait of Hormuz as a huge leverage point. The president, to Ryan's point, needs to figure out how to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And since Iran is engaged in asymmetrical warfare, that clear objective is not necessarily evident at this point in time, and how that goes about taking place. As you referenced, we don't know who we're negotiating with. It appears clear that from a military bombardment standpoint, we have done pretty much everything we wanted except get the Strait of Hormuz open. So that is the key element the president has to achieve here. From a political standpoint, we are moving in a direction where independents are very weary of what is taking place. They see gas prices moving up. You look at the president's approval number, according to Gallup, it's at 36%. George W. Bush's was at 37% at this point, leading into the 2006 midterm election. That is foreboding for Republicans. So it's what is the best from a country, for the country standpoint, from a military standpoint, and a political standpoint. Those may be two very different things.
Yeah. Speaking of politics, there's a lot of independents and Republicans and Democrats who are really PO'd about standing in line at the airport. Here's a Republican and a Democrat about this issue.
They've broken their word twice. In both shutdowns, they agreed to bills that were on the floor and then broke their word. That's on Senate Democrats. There's concessions in the legislation. The president's agreed to other concessions, but they keep moving the goalposts.
They are not things we came up with yesterday. They are common sense reforms, reasonable reforms.
No, they're not either.
Reforms
They're ridiculous.
that police departments across America follow every day.
I mean, both sides can make this case. You know, the president added the Save America Act. They had a deal. Now, Republicans came with a deal, and Democrats said, no, we want some more other things. They're not getting it done. And people are still standing in line.
And this whole thing started, over obviously what was going on in Minnesota, but the president's given them a lot. I mean, Noem is not there anymore. Holman is the sort of chief negotiator with the Democrats. You just can't give them enough. But what's being lost in the conversation is that there are really important things at stake. TSA, the border, the Coast Guard, cybersecurity, these things matter. But what's important is that Republicans have to remind the public who's at fault. Every long line, it's the Democrats. Every delay, it's the Democrats. They did it. We need to show that to the American people.
And Melissa, is there compromise quickly?
Look, if there is, but I don't see one clearly yet. And right now it's a pox on everybody's house. But when you are the one in charge, you bear the brunt. And we saw last night what happened in Palm Beach, what that looks like when you see a Democrat flip a seat that went plus 19 2 years ago Republican.
People are watching. Panel, thanks.
Would entertain the idea of a ceasefire and continue to launch attacks on Israel, Kuwait, and elsewhere. Iran is demanding that Lebanon now be involved in any future peace talks, just as Israel announced it will create a so-called buffer zone in southern Lebanon as it continues to pound Hezbollah. Meanwhile, in a post on X, Moshe Rezai, who is an Iranian military advisor and former commander of the IRGC, tried to send an ominous message to arriving U.S. troops. Now, according to state TV, leaders have rejected a proposed peace plan. They're issuing their own demands, including complete control of the Strait of Hormuz.
You will no longer see the previous prices of energy and oil until you realize that stability in the region is guaranteed by the powerful hand of our armed forces.
Iran knows it cannot win militarily, so it's using the leverage it has by prolonging the conflict. Now, what do they want to do? They want to inflict maximum economic pain on the region, on the U.S., the global economy, as much as possible, until they think Trump relents. But the White House doesn't seem to be blinking.
President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
Well, the problem is obviously unleashing hell means destroying infrastructure, which itself causes a series of cascading problems for the region, including maybe outside the region political problems for the president in a midterm election year. Here to weigh in on all of this, Nathan Sales, Ambassador at Large and former counterterrorism coordinator under President Trump, along with Tom Sauer, former surface warfare officer for the Navy. Mr. Ambassador, let's start with you. Iran seems to be playing this wait 'em out game, right? It's like they maybe send a signal they want to negotiate, then it's like we're not negotiating, now they say Lebanon has to be involved. What do you think is really going on here behind the scenes? Is my analysis correct on the waiting game?
I think you're exactly right, Laura. I think they're trying to play for time. They're trying to run some clock here, and they think that Donald Trump is going to get distracted or get onto some other priority, or they're thinking that the pressure on the economy, closing the Strait of Hormuz, is going to cause Donald Trump to pivot and move on to something else. And I just think they fundamentally misunderstood the man. President Trump's Iran policy has been consistent from day one. from the very first day of his first administration, and stretching back even before that, he says Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, they can't have ballistic missiles, and they can't be using terrorism to threaten their neighbors and threaten the United States. So those goalposts have never shifted. That has been our policy under President Trump from day one. Do the Iranians think he's going to suddenly change his mind because gas has gone up a little bit before the midterms? I think they're fundamentally misreading the situation and not serious about talks.
Now, Tom, is the Iranian regime, in your view, given what you're seeing, is it still a functional, serious military threat, or is it just putting on this strong front, flexing, trying to warn our troops, we're waiting for you, which was the message they put out today?
Well, I think they are flexing, like you said, because they have no real offensive capability. If they had some, we would actually see it. So I remember on one of my deployments when I was a young junior naval officer years ago, I read a really good book called The Art of the Deal, right? And I remember what that talks about is using maximum leverage against your counterpart, and to force a deal quickly, but also at the same time, you don't want to escalate to something where it'll make the issue worse. And that's what we're seeing right now from the Trump administration is, look, we've got all the cards. Iran has very few cards to play right now. And also, but at the same time, I think it's important for viewers to understand you have to put yourself in the shoes of the enemies. We call it tactical empathy. That's not sympathy, but just empathy, where you understand where are they coming from, what do they care about. They care about just the survival of the regime. And like what Nathan said, I agree. They're really hoping they can just wait it out and eventually this problem will go away. But now I think with the introduction of a Marine Expeditionary Unit and now a brigade combat team from the 82nd Airborne heading to the region, you know, I think that we're being very serious. I do not, however, believe we are going to see any sort of, you know, large ground invasion of Iran, of mainland Iran. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's really serious about that. And frankly, we don't need to.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, the Wall Street Journal is just reporting that the U.S. and Iran apparently are removing 2 leaders from their target lists through these talks, which we sometimes hear are not happening. So Iranian Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. What do we get out of this?
Well, I haven't seen the report, Laura, but there's got to be somebody to talk to. So if that means that we have to redirect our fire towards other bad guys in the regime for the time being, so much the better. But I think we need to be clear. There's no moderates in Tehran. None of the senior leaders that have been identified as possible candidates for a succession are anything like what we would recognize as moderates in a Western sense. They're all committed to the export of the Shia revolution. They all want to exterminate Israel. They all chant death to America. So maybe they say it in slightly sweeter tones, but they're all committed to the regime's fundamental raison d'etre, which is to expel the United States from the region and to destroy the Jewish state.
And Tom, I want to move back to the story that also broke today about Israel's desire to create a buffer zone, which means take over some land in Lebanon, clear it, remove the threat, and that seeming to trigger, again, whatever's left of the Iranian regime to say, wait a second, we want Lebanon to be part of these talks. Is that a complicating factor given that President Trump wants to bring home a victory sooner rather than later for the United States?
I don't really think so, because Israel right now, if they're going to take parts of Lebanon for their own security, they're going to do it. If they couldn't, or they thought it would be too much of a complicating matter, they probably wouldn't. So, you know, we all know that Israel has an exceptionally capable military given their size. So, and right now, it just comes right back to the fact that Iran has very few cards to play right now. So, absolutely, of course, the Israelis, acting in their best interest, which they are exceptionally good at, right? They are going to play their cards, and they can do so. If they didn't think they could, they probably wouldn't.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, Tom, both of you, thank you so much. And remember, the Iranian threat didn't emerge overnight. This has been building for decades.
It produced a more dangerous nuclear program, a breakout time that went from a year to a matter of weeks, and an Iran that was acting with even more destabilizing effect throughout the region, including endangering and attacking our own forces in ways that it hadn't before.
Of course, Tony Blinken was blaming Trump for Iran getting close to having nukes. But come on, in reality, this was 47 years of neglect from the establishment that allowed the regime to continue to get more and more powerful. But Biden did nothing. Nothing to stop it at all. And now they're admitting they should have done more, but political considerations got in the way.
I wish we'd gotten there. We worked very hard on getting that longer and stronger agreement. I'll acknowledge, too, that sometimes politics gets in the way. You have midterm elections. It shouldn't be, but it is too often a factor.
So they got in the way because President Biden didn't want to get into a...
I think we were looking at the right time to try to get this done.
Here to discuss Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. Senator Hawley, doesn't this once again demonstrate that even at the risk of great political cost at home, given where the public's viewpoint is emerging to on the Iran issue, President Trump saw a threat and decided to act on it, regardless of the midterm elections, regardless of what it might do in the short term to economic interest. He has to take this threat seriously and eliminate it from the public sphere. To me, it shows that Trump has guts and they have none.
Well, and what it shows is that Joe Biden left him a terrible mess, Laura, which of course we saw across the board. I mean, Joe Biden's instincts were wrong on everything when it came to the security of this country. Look at the border, an open border, overrun by gangs, criminals, you name it. Look what he did in Ukraine, where he embroiled us in that conflict, no way out, no end in sight. He just left that mess for Trump. He left Iran for Trump, all across the board. He was a total disaster. It's why he got thrown out, and you see a completely different approach with President Trump. And you talk about our military showing unbelievable, unmatched superiority. Look what they have done in just 3 weeks' time. It is incredible. That ought to be a warning for anybody who does not take the United States of America seriously.
And Senator, I want to remind everyone what Biden's Iran strategy was. Watch this.
Mr. President, to Iran in this moment.
Don't.
Senator, his plan was don't.
Yeah, his plan was, as ever, to sit around, appease dictators, appease those who are threatening the United States, open our borders, try to appease the cartels, get us involved in foreign wars like Ukraine, where he had no plan, no strategy, no idea what he was doing, and then just leave it for somebody else to fix. And I think you can see now a president with a very different approach, and you see a United States military, I can't emphasize this enough, Laura, that is doing everything that is being asked of it with flying colors. I mean, the president said it the other day, we've destroyed their Navy, we've destroyed their ballistic missile program, we've destroyed their nuclear program. I mean, what is there left? If you don't take the United States of America seriously now, then you're on another planet.
Right.
So CENTCOM said today that more than 10,000 targets have now been hit, 92% of Iranian's Navy largest vessels destroyed, that 10,000 combat flights, B-52 bombers, carrying 70,000 pounds of munitions on each mission. I mean, this is a devastating blow. Yet, we're still there. It's not even a month old, obviously, but are you concerned about the public and people, again, very short attention spans, very impatient for victory, as is President Trump, I might add. But in an election year, it's easy to say politics don't matter, but at some point, politics do come into play.
Well, I think the president said it the other day. I mean, victory has been won by all intents and purposes by any measure, any military measure. I mean, it's a question of what terms the Iranians will agree to, and there's no better negotiator than Donald J. Trump. But just from a military perspective, Laura, let's not allow people to cloud the issue here. Their military, their Navy is destroyed. Their ballistic missile program is all but destroyed. Their nuclear program is under rubble as we speak. That is total and complete domination. So Iran can try to spin this however they want. The truth is that we have shown total and complete dominance. And I just say again to our enemies across the globe, I might want to take note of that.
All right, Senator, thank you very much tonight. And coming up, they're broke, they're homeless, and they're hungry. What the Democrats have done to DHS and the TSA workers next.
Shamefully.
You love your...
Wait for Saturday, because as bad as air travel is now, prepare to have it get a lot worse, because airports are reporting TSA call-out rates of 40%, and sometimes even higher, and nearly 500 TSA workers have already quit. And yes, you can blame the Democrats.
We are being forced to consolidate lanes and may have to close smaller airports if we do not have enough officers.
But liberals don't give a rat's you-know-what about your inconvenience or the struggling TSA workers, even when their stories become heartbreaking.
Many in our workforce have missed bill payments, received eviction notices, had their cars repossessed and utilities shut off, lost their child care, defaulted on loans, damaged their credit line, and drained their retirement savings. Some are sleeping in their cars, selling their blood and plasma, and taking on second jobs to make ends meet, all while being expected to perform at the highest level when in uniform.
This is appalling. Senator Eric Schmidt agrees. He says it's a disgrace. He joins us from Washington. Senator, you heard
it is a
Friday's
disgrace.
Gonna be another missed paycheck for TSA workers. These stories are real. But Democrats have the gall to say that your party, Donald Trump, you guys are the ones blocking TSA workers from being paid.
Laura, I'm on your show a lot, and we talk about a lot of topics. I wish I could explain to your audience really how crazy this is. I work with these people. What the reality is, they care more about illegal immigrants than they do about the traveling public, these TSA workers. My dad works 7 days a week in the midnight shift. Most people cannot afford to miss a paycheck, let alone 3 or 4. A lot of these TSA agents, through various Democrat shutdowns, have missed 50% of their paychecks. Now they get it on back pay, but for most people, they're living paycheck to paycheck. The Democrats, they just don't care. This whole thing, Laura, is they want to defund ICE. They want de facto amnesty. They know they can't pass legislation that would give amnesty to the 15 million people that came here legally. So their next best option is to make sure ICE can't deport anyone. And they are willing to sacrifice the paychecks and the livelihoods of 260,000 Americans in the process. And so they don't care about that. They don't care about Sheridan Gordon, who was murdered in Chicago. They don't care about Laken Riley. They don't care about any of these people killed by illegal immigrants. The highest order for them, the operating principle for their whole party right now, is to value illegal immigrants, and it's killing this country, and it's absolutely, and it's destroying families' lives in the process.
Well, Bernie Sanders, Senator, was asked about what the Democrats have actually achieved with this shutdown. Watch.
Do you believe that Democrats have achieved anything as a part of the DHS shutdown?
I think they try to make the point that ICE is out of control. ICE is out of control, and it needs fundamental.
That's a big lie. Shame on you, Bernie. I used to support you.
Trying very hard.
Shame on you.
Senator, trying very hard? Is that what he said?
This is hostage taking, and again, Laura, I think that, again, people need to understand that the Democrats at this point, it's in their DNA. They believe in open borders. They don't think that as a sovereign country we should be able to deport anybody. They believe in these sanctuary jurisdictions that don't tell ICE agents when convicted rapists are being let out of prison. I don't know how we got here. This certainly isn't the party of Harry Truman or John F. Kennedy.
But Senator,
they have conceded.
Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what are you going to do about it? What are the Republicans going to do about it? We keep hearing this reconciliation.
Well,
that's never. It's cute, but I don't see how that happens with the numbers that you have. I don't even know if you're going to get that upheld by the parliamentarian if it did happen. But the idea of dealing with these people and cutting a deal, I think Donald Trump is right. No deal.
Yeah, listen, I'm not doing anything that kneecaps ICE's ability to deport illegal immigrants from this country, especially the people that are murdering our citizens. So we're not dealing with that. We're not doing that. We're not going to demask ICE agents, by the way, so their families can be terrorized. Because the point of that, Laura, is they don't want anyone to be an ICE agent. They don't want deportations to continue. We're not conceding to that point. And so, look, we voted continuously for TSA funding and all the other things. The Democrats have to come to their senses, because we're not going to give up on this idea that we're a sovereign country and we get to decide who gets to be here or not.
All right, Senator, thank you very much tonight. And coming up, California drilling. Oil is back. the angle towards the facility reopening off the coast of Santa Barbara. The climate change crazies are going nuts, but we have a report next. After more than a decade, the oil is flowing again here in California. The president invoking the Defense Production Act, allowing Sable Offshore Corp to restart its pipeline off the coast of Santa Barbara. And even bigger news, perhaps, is Chevron announcing it's going to start buying tens of thousands of barrels of oil from Sable. Well, Newsom's perfectly coiffed hair is probably on fire right now. The governor and the state are already suing to stop the pipeline. But these companies are brushing it off because it's time to drill, baby, drill.
Welcome to the platform Harmony. It's one of the 3 rigs owned by Sable, and it's where the whole process begins. Oil flows up from the well, and it's pumped ashore. This field is home to more than 600 million barrels of oil trapped for 11 years. It's home to the biggest oil reserve remaining on federal lands, this field. The crude oil then goes from this platform through the pipeline to the Las Flores Canyon processing plant. Jay Caldwell Flores, the chief operating officer and president of Sable, took us through the process.
What are we looking at exactly here?
We're walking through the Las Flores Canyon pipeline station. So this is where we ship 60,000 barrels of oil a day through that pump there into the
Wait. How many?
60,000 barrels a day. Wow. Processed crude going down to El Segundo refinery that's owned by Chevron.
When's the last time El Segundo refinery had that much oil running through it?
It has a good number of couple hundred thousand barrels, but this is a significant portion, and they have not had our crude in over 11 years.
So your crude hasn't gone through because of all the litigation?
Correct. Yes.
In 2024, Sable purchased ExxonMobil's Santa Barbara offshore assets in an effort to restart the Santa Ynez pipeline. It was shut down in 2015 due to the Refugio oil spill. How many employees here making all this happen?
Oh, a couple hundred. So about almost 300 employees on site.
How many during the 11-year hiatus?
40. And they were in a stasis, almost Stockholm Syndrome, PTSD of this will never happen. Tears flowed the days when we opened the pipeline.
People were crying because they were so happy that they actually had jobs again.
They had jobs, they had careers, longevity to look forward to, and they've been sitting in stasis for 11 years.
California was once an energy powerhouse, dominant in oil production. Back in 1985, California was producing 1.1 million barrels of oil every day. It was fulfilling 60% of its own oil supply. But by 2020, that had dropped down to a paltry 25%. Now, California mostly relies on foreign oil that's imported via ship. It only gets 16% of its oil from Alaska. So what happened? Jim Flores is the chairman and chief executive officer at Sable.
It's policy, Laura. The sitting policy was get rid of all oil production, oil refineries, all energy security, and outsource it to foreigners.
Why?
Well, because they felt like that was more environmentally prudent by bringing stinky tankers over here with crude oil and fuel versus refining here under our own regulations. Just bad policy. And we've been dealing with it for 20 years, and now it's coming home to roost.
What does energy security mean for California and for the country?
Energy security for California means it be able to produce its own energy, be able to defend itself, its military, everything on its own footing versus depending on others. And what's happened now, we're now a price taker. You've seen it in the California gasoline prices, jet fuel prices, scarcity of resources, because we're downstream of China and India, and all the Middle Eastern crudes being shut off.
When they say oil and water don't mix, they're right. What is this? What are we looking at?
Yeah, this is a mixture of oil and water that we get from our offshore platforms that's sent to our facility onshore that we treat and turn into pipeline spec crude that will be sent to a refinery.
And that gets made up 125 miles away into...
So this will eventually end up in Los Angeles, in the refineries in Los Angeles, right? So it will go through Bakersfield to LA, will then be turned into jet fuel, gasoline for cars, diesel for trucks, plastics, you name it.
In order to get into the middle of the action to see the natural gas-fired power plant, we had to put on fully flame retardant clothing and shoes.
Laura, this is our sweet gas treatment plant.
I
So we
think
take
she is
gas from offshore, run it through here.
different.
This is the treatment to go back into our own turbines.
I like
This is
her,
part of
but-
our full cycle fuel source that keeps us from having to purchase or consume exterior gas in order to electrify and power the facility and the offshore platforms.
Self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient. We are a net benefit power add, not a consumer. Sable is the originator of American energy independence and American energy dominance. We're at the forefront getting barrels to the American people who desperately need them, especially in the West Coast.
So, not the middleman.
Not the middleman.
The primary.
We're the primary. We are the kickoff point for American energy dominance.
Yeah, so you don't get the oil out. You don't get the oil out of the source. Don't pump it in. Don't pump it out. What do you have?
You have it coming from the Middle East and South America, and right now those cargoes are being redirected to Asia because they're paying more, as you've heard ad nauseum.
News this week that Chevron is going to buy the bulk of your oil production.
Almost the entirety of our oil production in the imminent future will be going to Chevron's El Segundo refinery, directly servicing LA motorists as well as LAX jet fuel. In fact, they have a direct line that sends JPL jet fuel straight to the LAX tanks.
So how big of a deal is that?
That's massive.
Chevron's line.
Chevron, being a good American patriot, they're stepping in and recognizing the crisis on this coast in order to make sure we have the right national defense posture, as well as trying to tamp down prices.
But Rob Bonta, the Attorney General, he wants to stop all this in its tracks. He's saying that Defense Production Act, unconstitutional, it's overreach, wants to shut all this down.
I can't speak to his motives, but I can say it's very foolish to be dependent on foreign powers for our energy security needs, not just for our national defense, but for everyday consumers.
Energy independence, national security, economic security, growth for the state of California, great jobs, it desperately needs those. All of this is here. And we will see which side wins. The climate change crazies and those who want to stop innovation and stop energy independence, or the side of common sense. President Trump, the innovators, the job creators. In the end, it's about American innovation. We innovate better than anyone, and here in this facility, it's just another example of how great this country is and the possibility
Amen.
of wonderful people, wonderful individuals, great talent gets together, works hard for a common goal.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition of godly
And
principles.
afterward, I talked to Ryan McLeod, who's one of the senior staff on the, called senior staff, but he's a person in charge on that particular platform. He said when they got word that the Defense Production Act had been ordered by President Trump and this was going to start pumping oil again, he got really emotional. He said, these men here have good paying jobs. It means the world to them. And he thanked President Trump. It was a very emotional moment. Quite an education today being out there. And by the way, they put in huge safety, safety protocols, improved piping, pressure testing, double pressure testing. So they're very confident that risks are mitigated, because that is a big concern, obviously, for the people of Santa Barbara. But fascinating, and a great, great group of men out there. Coming up, a college student murdered by an illegal alien, and the school newspaper says, sorry for covering it. Unbelievable. We'll bring it to you next.